So while they're getting seated, as the moderator, I get to ask the first question. Across all of your presentations, you spoke about how institutions, public or private, affect data openness standards, norms, and trust. And I recently attended the Humanitarian Technology Conference at MIT earlier this week. Someone revealed to us that within the Ebola crisis in Liberia, there were multiple Ebola response centers in close proximity to each other, but they were operated by different NGOs. And they were unwilling to share data with each other on their resources, what types of medical equipment they had, whether or not they had protective gear available to them, their medical personnel. And because of that, one can assume that perhaps lives were lost because they weren't willing to link in and share the data, to be able to share the resources and facilitate that process. So my question is, what factors do you think need to be in place to foster a culture accepting of open data? There's a little bit of data sandboxing. This is my data, and I don't want to share it with you, but that could have very negative consequences.
Well, I guess I just explained what my perspective would be, that is a trust issue, that those two NGOs just don't have a relationship. So for some reason, they were not trusting each other to do whatever it was they each wanted, like provide credit or share back, or what, we don't know what the problem was, so it's hard to say what the answer is, but it sounds like they just don't know each other.
I think also with their funding mechanism from federal agencies, they are allocated so much funding for X resources, and they have to account for those resources, and there isn't a mechanism yet to show we shared these resources with this other NGO, yeah. X number of lives were saved by doing this, right. Instead of warehousing our suits.
I think there are also many cities that are reluctant to share their data because they think that they will not make the benefit of it, and the added value will go to a private company, maybe in foreign countries, and they will not see anything of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think we could foster...
clarify who benefits from it, the rule of the game, and the economic impact.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't just think of the benefits as economic, but there are social benefits, and that perhaps we could encourage public-private partnerships and define better outcomes that are economic and social, political.
One aspect is this expectation management, because some cities, they open up data and then they expect that there's millions of developers, well, okay, even 10 of developers coming to start working on their data, and that doesn't necessarily happen. So somehow we should have this kind of, first of all, find ways for those organizations to get the benefit themselves from the sharing and somehow move on to that, and then only see if the data can also help third parties to create something meaningful.
Yeah. And I think Mackenzie's statement on trust is important here, building trust between the developers and government on collaboration, and that they won't just come in, develop something, and leave, and then now the government the local city worker has to figure out what to do, but building trust.
Mackenzie and I were talking about an example within the university before the panel started, which is a community of our clinical researchers. Talk about governance, right? It wasn't just data governance, right? It was governance around IRBs in terms of, they got money to do a collaboration across the 5 universities that have academic medical centers. And part of that was putting in governance, not data governance, but governance. What are the committees that we're going to have? How are we going to make decisions, aligning on goals and incentives? Understanding where they were competitive with each other and where collaboration made sense. And out of that fell a conversation about how they were going to manage the data. It's been a 5-year journey. I mean, I walked into this working with them in year 4 of their 5-year journey. But the foundation of what we've learned from them is something we're taking into other examples. And trust would be the first word in my mouth when I talk about that group.
Another thing I wanted to talk about was the use of publicly funded data for commercial purposes. So what do you think are the benefits and drawbacks of using public funded data for commercial purpose?
We at least in Helsinki like to believe that it results in better services for our citizens, because the public sector cannot provide everything for every single niche group, so we see that kind of benefits. But then of course when we try to create this single market and harmonize things, and so forth, then the question is that is there only the big companies who can actually benefit from that larger market? Can we see Finnish companies doing that they scale their services abroad and build new services using open data, or is it only Google who can do it? That's one of the threats.
Yeah. I've lived on both sides of this issue, and I think publicly funded data, part of that is to make that data open and accessible for people and organizations to figure out what might be able to be done with that. I mean, even if you look at the examples of Google and Apple, right? I mean, they try to create a platform for others to come in and create value. Some of that value represents $1 being exchanged. Some of it is not. I mean, there are a lot of free apps out there that we take advantage of. And I look at, when the federal government in this country, funds research, I think part of their mindset is, we're driving research and discovery. At the same time, we're trying to put out there something that has the ability for individuals to take and create more value around the common good. Mm-hmm. With that, in our economic model is sometimes the exchange of dollars, and we have mechanisms and plenty of forums where we debate about whether that's gone too far or whether it has to be brought back to the middle. But I think that data does have to go public to private and private to public, and working together around whatever the interests might be.
Mm-hmm. So speaking for researchers, this is one of the topics that comes up all the time, right? And there's something reductionist about talking about federally funded data and making it available to the public, because it leaves out the person who created the data. Mm-hmm. And for a researcher, that's a big deal. It can represent decades of work. Mm-hmm. So I do hear that emotionally, people want to believe that their research isn't going to go to benefit some big corporation with nothing coming back to that person, no credit, no money, nothing. So that is the single most commonly cited reason for not sharing your data. You don't want to keep it away from other researchers or students or good people in the public, but you want to keep it out of the hands of evil corporations who will profit from it. And so we really have to figure out a way to address that emotional concern, right? And again, it's not a legal issue, because really, whether you control, they try to control it through legal mechanisms, but it's really more of an issue of trust, again, that they'll get something back for this gift they've given.
Right. And I wanted to comment that I think it's not just big companies who can take advantage of open data, but smaller startup companies are lean, mean, and agile. They can get in and dig into the data and maybe do something a lot quicker than Google could, or another large company. So I think
But then, Google will buy them.
Yeah,
But
they
Google
could.
sorry.
Yeah.
If they sell. I'd like to open it to the audience because we only have a couple of minutes.
Good morning. Really enjoyed the panel. It's Hannah?
Yes.
Hi. Question about city piece. It's really exciting that 6 cities in Finland would come together in a collaboration and spawn this kind of innovation. But do you ever lie awake at night thinking about the redundancy in the development of these apps? If the Boston region and the Helsinki region and the Beijing region are all separately employing these teams, working vigorously to end up coming up with identical sound solutions because there's a convergence eventually, doesn't that represent a lot of wasted effort? And if so, is it driven mostly by the fact that Helsinki and its region needs to own what Helsinki and its region creates rather than buying it from Pittsburgh?
No, I think we are really, that's why we are trying to collaborate, is that we really promote reuse of services and trying to get to the next level so that not everybody would create a similar transit app. And I think that's why we are working together to harmonize the APIs, and we are not just doing it in a closed vacuum in Finland, but we are looking across also, I mean, for example, to issue reporting, we are using Open 311 API, which actually originated from here. And so forth. So we are really trying to look and remove the redundancy. So to speak.
When I buy wine from France, I have to pay a tax. When I get data from France, apparently I don't have to pay a tax. And we're talking in many ways about how data crosses boundaries between universities, between countries, into corporations and out of corporations, and from small to large. But none of them account for the value of that data. And isn't it time we should formulate some kind of data tax? And could that tax be paid in data so that if a corporation produces data, it has to give 10% of its data to the state and vice versa?
There is a proposal. I mean, there have been studies made on data taxes. So taxing flow of data is the way you tax flow of goods or services. I guess that's one of the possibility. But even if we were taxing flow, if you look at what happens now in Europe and the US and this very strong asymmetry, taxes wouldn't change the problem that essentially our economy is going to be controlled by US companies. So each time you take a taxi, part of the money goes to San Francisco essentially. And the largest part of the added value, essentially there will be very little benefit on the local side and much more on the remote side. So even if there were taxes, I think this imbalance is still a very important problem.
Just to take a slightly different interpretation, have you heard about the NIH comments? Because it's sort of getting at what you're talking about. It's a new initiative from the NIH to build a cloud data storage facility that lets researchers donate or give their data to this common and in exchange get free cycles, free storage for their research. So they're trying to build a gift economy around this notion of data sharing, building on commercial cloud providers. So the NIH is just sort of providing the platform, but it's a very interesting idea for motivating people to share in exchange for something. So it's not a tax exactly, but it is that kind of like you get back what you give in concept.
So can I add something on that? So there is the primary data that you put in the shared platform. But then that platform knows everything about what people are doing on the platform. It has the secondary data, the traces, and this is always the value. The value is never in the primary data. It's always in the data you derive. So this is a very nice model, but it's a model where there is a winner takes all. It looks nice, but the value is in the platform, not in the data that is put in the platform.
I think we have time for one quick question.
Okay. I kind of find it a bit ironic that Europe's complaining about all the data being in the US because it was Europe that was charging everybody for their data, including their GIS data, all kinds of data, and made it very complicated. And the US government, to their advantage, was giving this data away. And it was because of Europe's obstinance about providing free data and having to charge for it, especially the land ordinance of the UK and other things. And now all of a sudden, Europe seems to be crying wolf. And so it's good that you're now providing data for the society of Europe too, and catching up with trying to equalize what the U.S. is. What are your ideas about that?
Well, I think looking at weather data, you're exactly correct. If you see you opened up here the weather data, and you've had a lot of economic growth related to that. And in Europe, we didn't.
Data and all kinds of data, and we were just giving it away.
Yeah, I think this is a very good remark. It's very ironical. But there are many aspects of the policy in Europe that make Europe fail in a very bad way. So there is a beginning of a movement. I don't know how far it will go. But we failed badly, and there is not much lessons taken from that failure.
With that, let's thank our panel. Thank you.